Welcome everyone to this evening's session with AUS TAMIL TV. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land. This was and always will be Aboriginal land, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Today, we have a very important person with us, Dr. Hugh McDermott, State Member for Prospect. Prior to his election to Parliament, Hugh worked as a barrister and the Director of Financial Crime and Programs at the Australian Graduate School of Policing and Security at the Charles Sturt University. Hugh is also actively involved in his community and holds a number of prominent positions within community organisations, and is also Brigade President and volunteer firefighter with the Rural Fire Service. Hugh is well known to the Tamil community in Sydney as a long-time supporter, friend and ally. Someone we can count on to stand in solidarity with us during our most difficult of times, and someone we may run into on the weekend at our local Tamil takeaway shop having a meal with his family. On the 18th of May this year, Hugh stood with us and released the Statement of Solidarity commemorating Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day. To the Tamil community, the 18th of May is not just symbolic of the end of the brutal genocidal onslaught by the Sri Lankan forces that culminated in the slaughter of over 150,000 innocent Tamil civilians, with tens of thousands more still unaccounted for. It is a day that symbolises the continued and systematic genocide carried out by the Sri Lankan government for over 7 decades. So welcome, Hugh. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you tonight.
Vadakam, Avi, thank you very much for inviting me on the program.
Thank you. And so apologies to you as well for the delays that we had at the start. Thank you for your patience. Hugh, I'll get right into it. What motivated you to share your views and solidarity with the Tamil community on our journey towards accountability and justice on Tamil Genocide Remembrance Day this year?
Well, this year has been, I've been doing this now every year since I've been elected as an MP. I first posted comments about the Tamil genocide in 2015. And because I was, as you've done an introduction, it was very flattering. Thank you for that introduction. I was a barrister before this, before I became a Member of Parliament. So I looked at the evidence. I looked at the recommendations and resolutions from the Human Rights Commission of the United Nations. I looked at all the information which I could find about what happened in Sri Lanka, not just during the Civil War, but before that, going right back to independence and the discrimination by the government against minorities, not only Tamils, but Catholics and Muslims, everybody. And so when it came to this date, in May, it's the right thing to do. And so also I basically have around me in my home many people, and my neighbours and my friends, people who I buy my Tamil breakfast on a Sunday morning with, from the Tamil community. So it's not something which was new to me. And I've had many conversations with many people who survived the genocide, who fled to this country in Australia for protection, and the evidence is overwhelming. So it is not an unusual thing for me on the 18th of May to make comments like I did. What has surprised me is the reaction of the Sri Lankan government.
Yeah. Look, I mean, your message was so well received this year in particular, I believe, because of our online streaming with COVID restrictions. So your message of solidarity with the Tamil community has been viewed all over the world by both the Tamil and the Sri Lankan Sinhalese community. I can tell you that the global Tamil community was touched to receive your message of support, and now your name is common to Tamil households everywhere. But as you mentioned, basically immediately after your message aired, you were bombarded with messages of hate and attacks on social media, calling you a person supporting terrorists and that you're making false accusations. The hate campaign launched against you by the Sri Lankan government and its supporters has been quite intense, to say the least. And I can appreciate how overwhelming and surprising this would have been for you, considering that you have been an avid supporter of the Tamil community for so many years. But, you know, as as a member of the Tamil community, I can tell you that this is not something that's new to us. It's commonplace for the Sri Lankan government and its supporters to attempt to silence our collective voice using language such as, the war against terror, and stating that we're motivated by a separatist agenda. We've become accustomed to the Sri Lankan government's attempts to draw attention away from the structural genocide they continue to commit by launching their hate campaign, in which being Tamil is equivalent to being a terrorist. These past 6 weeks would have undoubtedly been really challenging for you. Can you give us an insight into some of the obstacles and challenges you've faced and continue to face as a result of your statement?
Well, I've done human rights work for many years, both in this country and overseas, and not only with the Tamil community, but with other communities, South Sudanese, with the Assyrian community, the Armenian community, all who have had genocide committed against them and war crimes. So it wasn't a new thing for me. But I have to say, it was quite incredible that after I posted that video, which only goes for a minute or so, the onslaught of trolls, if you want to use that word, on social media was incredible. Hundreds, if not thousands, of abusive emails, threatening violence against me, against my family, sexual violence against my wife and other members of my family. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, this sums up exactly the type of people which we must stand against. These are the types of people, these extremists are the ones that cause the genocide, that commit war crimes, that commit hate crimes. Now, what happened with me, like you said, you're used to, just like every other community who has had to be subjected to such hate crimes as this. Now, so that began. I was shocked at first, and then every time somebody from the Tamil community said something positive to me, they themselves would be attacked hundreds of times, threatened with violence, and the glee, the absolute glee of putting up and posting pictures of dead Tamils, which is what these people were doing. Members of my staff, especially the young women in my staff, were shocked and appalled. One had to go home early because she was just so shocked by what they were trying to do to me, but also to the Tamil community, because, as a member of parliament who has a decent number of Tamil community members around him in Western Sydney, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not only just representing myself, but I'm representing my community. And it is far beyond the Tamil community where this happens. We live in a multicultural society in Australia. So an attack on one of us, on one community, is an attack on all of us. And, so there was threats of violence. You would have seen the Rear Admiral's comments in regards to me. And I have to thank him because he posted my video first. And so even more people got to see it before he then attacked me. And then the other trolls that came through. And there were phone calls, none from my electorate. No, they're all from overseas or Melbourne. And this was the thing. This was a concerted campaign against me and continues on even today. So, that was the challenge. At first, I was shocked. And, but it just reinforced into my mind that we are on the side of right, that what we are doing is the correct path, because this is the reaction from the hate mongers and those people who would see the Tamil people annihilated, and people like me, because we stand up for human rights. So they were the challenges. Luckily, and I'm very, very lucky, that the Tamil community rallied behind me, right? Immediately, leaders in the community in Western Sydney, but also different parts of the world and in Australia, immediately called me, came to see me, because they wanted to show their support, to show that I wasn't alone with all these attacks. And so that were the challenges, and they continue on. Obviously also what these people did is they wrote directly to Labor Party leaders, to the Premier, to the Prime Minister and others, which will achieve absolutely nothing when it comes from them. But that's the type of attacks which they've done, and that's what I've been living through the last few weeks.
Look, I can't even imagine how it would have felt for you to receive all of those emails. As a member of the Tamil community and somewhat being an activist myself, I fully understand that, things that we post do get comments and feedback, and our Facebook profiles are reported, our Instagram profiles are reported, and these are things that activists in the Tamil community face day to day, but probably or definitely not to the extent that you would have faced it over the last 6 weeks. So, and it's really heartwarming to the Tamil community to hear you say that despite all of this, you stand strong. And like you said, it goes to show, if a parliamentarian in Australia is subjected to this level of abuse by people who have nothing to do with your electorate, it really goes to show what our innocent civilians in the homeland would be subjected to for merely raising their voice, or posting, sharing something, or speaking out against any government authority. And this is something that's continuing to this day. With regard to Rear Admiral Sarath Veerasekara and his responses to your statement, he, as part of his statement, he invited you to, come to Sri Lanka and do your own investigation into the war crimes committed by the Sri Lankan government, and asserted that it would be proven to you that nothing of the sort had happened. But I guess what I'm interested to know is whether you would endeavour on this journey to help the Tamil community in our search for accountability and justice, and if that's something that is, in the works for you in the coming years and months.
Look, I think it's the Rear Admiral, and I think it's hilarious that he was the one that was put up, no doubt, by the inner circle of the military or the government in Sri Lanka. This is a man who called on national television for human rights activists to be classed as traitors and publicly executed by hanging. Now, this is a man who went before the UN, and when the UN decided that Sri Lankan army officials, officers rather, could not be UN peacekeepers because there was alleged war crimes against them, and he defended them. So, I mean, if he's the man who wants to make if he wants to be my enemy, I'm very pleased about that, because I would not want to be friends with a person like that. So, as for the War Crimes Tribunal, as for a fact whether there should be an investigation, yes, there should. There's been at least 2 UN resolutions saying that there should be an investigation. And we're at a point where the government has twice now basically refused to do a proper investigation into war crimes, both by any side that was involved in the civil war. And the reason they've done that is because they know the truth. We've seen it on documentaries by Channel 4. We've seen it through photos. It is out there. It's very well documented. And they know if there is an investigation that they will be found guilty of war crimes, and there'll be people that must pay. Now, I think we're at a point where we need, as parliamentarians, not only in this country, but throughout the world, to start putting more and more pressure on the Sri Lankan government. And if they don't act, then it needs to be referred to the War Crimes Tribunal courts, right? And they have to be tried, just like people like them who committed atrocities and committed war crimes in other parts of the world. They have to be done. So if anything this has done, this has firmed my resolve to make this happen. Now, it's been very good in that whilst these attacks on me continued on, many parliamentarians who saw me being attacked, not only in New South Wales, but throughout this country, but also throughout the world, in India, in Canada, in the UK. And might I say, members of Parliament in those countries also made comments like this. The head of the British Labour Party was very clear and very similar to what I had to say. And he used to be a Crown prosecutor. So, we have this band of people who are now standing up more and more, and we need to do that. And that's where we need to go with this. And like with other genocides, like the Armenian genocide and others, the state parliaments and the federal parliaments need to recognise this as a genocide against the Tamil people that began after Sri Lankan independence in the 1940s.
Well, you've taken a strong stance to acknowledge the genocide committed by the Sri Lankan government against and its forces against the Tamil people. Is this something we can expect to be supported and endorsed by the Labor Party as a whole to take on as a party stance?
I don't think it's just the Labor Party. I think that what's happened here is that I've had discussions with Labor Party MPs, with rank and file members as well, but also I've spoken with Liberal Party MPs as well. and other parties, Greens and others. And I think that this is something that can be a cross-party position, because nobody in a true democracy accepts war crimes. Nobody in a true democracy accepts racism and hatred against anyone. And hate crimes need to be stood up against. So I think this is going to go beyond just the Labor Party. Yes, I'm a Labor Party MP, and I do believe there would be strong support in New South Wales for this. But I think this is going to be a merger of different political parties that will stand up together to support the Tamil people and seek justice and acknowledgement of genocide in Sri Lanka.
Mm. The Tamil community launched an online campaign to show you our support as soon as we realized that there was a campaign against you running. And this now has over 100,000 signatures, which is a great show of support. But in terms of support that we can provide you as your constituents, is there anything in particular that we can do to show the Australian government that we stand with you in your statement and that, we support you?
I think that firstly, I was quite humbled by the response. For your viewers, what happened is that when the attacks on me first started, an individual down in Melbourne, I think it was, set up a change.org site condemning me, calling me to apologise, denying there was a genocide. In fact, that the Sri Lankan government and the military was helping the Tamil people at the end of the Civil War. Now, I was disgusted by that. But then what happened is some close to 10,000 signatures signed to that change.org, 10,300 and something like that. And majority of the people weren't from this country. They were predominantly from overseas in Sri Lanka. So it seemed pretty obvious that it came in from the government coordination. And you can tell that because what happened is that a number of people came to see me from our local community, and they were concerned. And they said, look, one of our friends one of our colleagues in Canberra has set up a change.org site in support of you. And so they said to me, are you nervous about these 3,000 who've signed against you? And I said, it doesn't matter if we only get one more person supporting us. I will always support this because this is the right thing to do. Now, they went away and they talked to their friends, they talked to their colleagues, they talked to other political parties. And we went from, whilst the survey a petition that was condemning me stayed at 3,000, the one that was supporting me went to over 100,000 as of yesterday. Over 100,000 people in this country, overseas, in Tamil Nadu, in Canada, in the UK, throughout the world, supported what I was saying. Now, I haven't looked at it today. I haven't looked at it this afternoon, but no doubt it's well over 100,000 now. That's incredible. I've never seen a change.org petition go so fast like that. And you know what happened with the one that was condemning me? It hasn't moved. No more signatures since the other day. And that just showed that on Friday, probably the weekend came, and so the Sri Lankan government decided not to continue with this campaign against me on change.org. And we've certainly showed them real people power, 10 times what they could put up. Now, as far as helping me, yes, I think you can. I think I think that if you send me letters of support or emails to support, I appreciate that. That helps me build up the numbers of people who are supportive of the stand which we're taking. But also you should write to the Prime Minister and give the stand, say that we should be looking at condemning Sri Lanka, making sure that no alleged war criminals come into this country, like the US has stopped certain army officers from going there, but also that we need to hold the Sri Lankan government to account. They need to enforce the UN resolutions and set up and do a proper investigation to war crimes. So that's the first. I would also suggest that we write to the Premier and say that we should be endorsing and recognising that there was a Tamil genocide. I think they're the things. And if you live in, no matter what state you live in, write to your Premier, write to your local MP and say those things. Because we need a groundswell. Doesn't matter where you live in the world, you should do this. And we just keep on building this up because the momentum has started. They tried to bully me. They've been bullying the Tamil community for decades. Well, the time will come when there is justice, and we must make sure that happens.
Thanks, Hugh. Building on the momentum is something that we're definitely feeling within the Tamil community in Australia and worldwide. And I guess in light of that, you may be aware that in Ontario, in Canada, they have recognised the week prior to May 18th as Tamil Genocide Week, and school students between years 1 and 12 are educated on the genocide inflicted upon the Tamil people. Is this something that we can potentially implement in the Prospect area or in wider New South Wales?
Oh, I think so. I remember a number of years ago, I spoke to the Parliament about introducing the Tamil language into the schools. Now, at that time, people said, oh, that's a great dream, but probably never happened. Now, since then, it pretty much has happened. We've had more funding towards that. The classes have increased, certainly in high schools, and we need to roll it out, and we continue to do that. And that will happen in every state in time. I think this is the same with this. Some years ago, in the New South Wales Parliament, the Armenian and Assyrian and Greek communities came to the parliamentary members and asked that they recognise the genocide that was committed against them in 1915 by the Ottoman Turks. People said, oh, it couldn't happen, and the Turkish government attacked the parliament and threatened not to let any MPs ever come to Turkey or go to Gallipoli. Guess what happened? The MPs stood together and they recognised the genocide. And I think that needs to happen in New South Wales. And I think that needs to happen in Victoria and every other state in this country. And I think that's where we need to start going, because the more recognition we have, and where the democracies say, no, enough is enough, we recognise what happened because we acknowledge the facts and the truth. Now, that's what's happened in Ontario. And it's wonderful that that's happened there. They've led the world. But I want to see that happen in every place where there is a Tamil community who has been affected by this. I'll tell you a quick story in that what was the thing that really mattered to me when I first started to learn about the Tamil genocide. And I think it was the first year that I was an MP. It was a commemoration service for the 18th of May. And I was invited to a service in Blacktown. And I walked in and I was the only non-Tamil there. And there were 300 families in that hallway who had lost people in the final weeks of the war. 300 from my local community. And they told their stories. And I'll tell you, it changed me. I knew whose side I was on. I knew what the truth was, because they all bear witness to what happened on those terrible months and years. And so that's the key, to let people know, through education programs, through TV programs like this, by addressing the parliament, by addressing the media, doing whatever we need to do to raise awareness.
One of the fears that we have as the global Tamil community is that our history was rewritten by the Sri Lankan government when they burnt down Jaffna Library all those years ago. And the history that's taught in Sri Lanka and the history that is told to the world is not accurate. It's not a true depiction of the Tamil people, our heritage, our culture, our values, our land, anything. And I guess one of the most serious concerns that we have is that our children and their children will grow up without knowing what their people stood for, what our people went through, and the sacrifices that were made by members of our community to ensure that we do have our liberated land. And so this education program in Ontario is something that works to counter that, make sure that kids grow up knowing, not just Tamil kids, but all kids grow up to know what it means to be Tamil. At the moment, there's an online campaign that will be starting tomorrow and initiated in Canada, saying that I am Tamil and genocide is part of my identity. And I think it's really important that that's something all Tamils all over the world truly feel, acknowledge, and something we do pass on. It's not airy-fairy and it's not happy, but it is part of who we are, and it is something that the world needs to understand. I'm just hopeful that if it does come to a stage where we do have these education programs in place Australia-wide, then we'll stop being asked the question, oh, are you Sri Lankan? And we can actually respond with saying, no, I'm Tamil and I'm Australian, and not have to follow that through with an explanation as to where Tamil comes from.
Well, that's absolutely right. I mean, how an oppressor, and we've seen this throughout the world time and again, destroys a people. To remove them as a people in genocide is to take their language from them. And we've seen that recently, you know, in Sri Lanka, not just recently, it's been going on for some years in Sri Lanka, but removing Tamil as a language, changing the history, rewriting the history, denying existence. That's what they do, right? Especially with the young, they try and indoctrinate the young. And, you know, one of the reasons why I've been a big supporter of the Tamil language is for that very reason. Because oppressors, people who commit genocide, right, do exactly like this. They do it to time and time again. We've seen it with the Armenian genocide, that the Turks took away tried to take their language. My background is Irish. I never knew the Irish language because the British had refused to let it be taught in schools in Ireland. And then when my great parents came here, they didn't speak it properly. I mean, it was taken away. We see it time and again. And that is why the Tamil language is so important. That is why the Tamil history is so important, and the philosophies, which has been around for thousands and thousands of years. It's an amazing language. I mean, as you probably know, there are elements of the Tamil language in Aboriginal languages in Australia that would date back thousands of years. They probably came across in the Great Migrations. It's amazing, and the philosophies are incredible. And that's just off the top of my head. So the culture needs to be protected, and it needs to be taught from generation to generation. And like you said, as part of your history, as part of your culture, is the fact that they tried to wipe you out, that they tried to make sure there were no more Tamils, and they're still trying, right? The Tamil identity is extremely important, and it is part of this rich culture, which is a multicultural New South Wales and a multicultural Australia. And it's important that we protect it and it flourishes.
Very true. Hugh, our part of our identity is certainly the genocide that was inflicted on us. Hugh, part of the campaign that was launched against you, just to take it back to that, accused you of being motivated by a desire to indulge the Tamil vote bank, which, you know, quite largely lives in your constituency. Yeah. Do you have any comments regarding this?
Yeah, I mean, look, they accused me of a lot of things. They called me a terrorist, a white tiger, which I thought was quite interesting. That's what I never thought I'd ever be called. And then they said, "Oh, you're just trying to build the Tamil vote." Well, okay, let's be honest. I sit on an 11% margin. The last election, I won every single booth in the election. Every single one, right? I'm not doing this to get votes, right? The Tamil community knows me well. They see me at Pendle Hill all the time and other places and events. I don't need to pander to anybody, and I wouldn't. I have a higher moral caliber than that. What I've been talking about is abuses of human rights, of war crimes, right? That's what it is. And I've talked about that with every community which I've been involved with, right? Not only communities that are in the electorate, but also outside. Because as somebody who was a barrister before that, and as someone who's a social democrat, a member of the Labor Party, these are important issues to me, extremely. And I tell you, it makes me so angry when people denial of genocide. If I was Attorney General, I'd make it a crime in this state. I really would. I just, when the facts are obvious, when it's there, genocide denial is just the most appalling thing. And I see it time and again, and I just do not accept it. And I certainly don't accept it when it comes to the Tamil genocide or the Armenian Assyrian genocide or the South Sudanese or Rwanda or anywhere else. And I am in a very lucky position as a member of parliament that I can voice these opinions. I can talk for my community, but also I can talk for what the facts are and where our society should be leading and the things with actions we should be taking as a democracy. And that is what I'm doing.
Definitely, Hugh. Having your support and your backing in such a strong way, not only has lifted our spirits in post May 18th, but it's it sparked a fire everywhere, all over the world. Like I said, your name is known now throughout Tamil households everywhere, and I'm sure that people will, listen to you anytime you have anything to say regarding disadvantaged people and people who've been subjected to genocide just as ours. All over the world. Hugh, thank you for your time today and your continued support of the Tamil community in Australia. Most of us have created a second home for ourselves here due to the persecution we faced in Sri Lanka as Tamils, and many more of our Tamil brethren have sought asylum in Australia post 2009 due to the ongoing persecution they were subjected to there. Although there are over 50,000 Tamils in Australia, many of whom were born on our soil, the lack of support we received from the government in 2009 and the continued mistreatment of Tamil asylum seekers in Australia often makes it difficult for us to feel like we belong. It's when parliamentarians like yourself stand in solidarity with us and in such a strong way as you do, that we feel a sense of hope and that our journey towards accountability and justice for the victims and survivors of the Tamil genocide is not in vain. And as you mentioned, Australia is home to many hundreds of survivors, many of whom who have fled here as asylum seekers, who are still waiting to have their claims processed, and many of whom who have had their claims refused and in the review process in our court system. And having your support means a great deal. So on behalf of Tamils in Australia and all over the world, I just want to thank you again for standing by us, and rest assured that we'll continue to support you as we've done so.
Thank you so very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here tonight. It means a lot to me to be invited. I look forward to continuing the journey and the fight for justice. We will get it. And it's not just justice with the genocide, but justice for the asylum seekers and for so many other people in our Tamil communities that really need to be supported, who are a valuable part of our Australian society and are our friends and colleagues. And so I continue to do that, and I look forward to the time when there is justice and those perpetrators who've hurt the Tamil community are finally brought to justice.
Thanks, Hugh.